The riverfront keeps moving like it doesn't care who's watching. Wet concrete, chain link, flickering light that can't decide. Officer EC, calm focused male officer, early 30 seconds, medium athletic build, defined jawline, short textured dark hair, light stubble, slightly tired eyes, natural skin texture with pores, tactical police uniform with subtle wear marks, grounded realistic expression drives with no radio chatter. Just wipers, just breath. K9, shadow, black and tan German Shepherd, black saddle pattern, black facial mask, golden tan fur, upright alert ears, amber eyes, small notch on left ear, muscular structure, realistic fur texture. B. Tactical K9 harness sits still behind the barrier. A gate ahead hangs open. Padlock swinging. Inside the yard, a thin strip of fluorescent light leaks under a door that should be dead. K9, shadow stops, samples the air. The leash tightens. Once. From somewhere low and dark, someone exhales like they've been holding it too long. The riverfront didn't have a bedtime. It only changed its voice. At noon, the water carried laughter from joggers and the slap of dock lines against posts, the small metallic clinks of bicycles and coffee cups, and a city pretending it was gentle. After midnight, the same place turned honest. Concrete sweated. Wind worried the chain-link fences. The river itself moved like a dark thought, slow, heavy, and impossible to argue with. Officer Ethan Cole drove with the kind of stillness that made the patrol car feel less like a machine and more like a decision. No music, no idle chatter, just the wipers cutting a patient rhythm through fine sleet and the occasional hiss of tires on wet asphalt. The dashboard glow carved clean angles across his face. Early 30s, disciplined posture, jaw set in a way that wasn't anger so much as control. His eyes stayed on the road, but they were never really looking at the road. He tracked the world in layers: light, shadow, movement, absence. Beside him, K9 Shadow sat upright in the back seat behind a steel barrier, harness straps catching the dim light. Black and tan coat, ears alert, gaze pinned forward. He wasn't restless. Shadow didn't waste energy on nervousness. He conserved himself like a blade kept sharp. The radio crackled. Unit 12, dispatch said. Welfare check at the Rivergate Industrial Annex. Caller reports lights on, movement inside. Facility is listed as closed, no night crew scheduled. Ethan's thumb pressed the mic without his eyes leaving the roadway. Unit 12. Copy. En route. The Rivergate Annex was the kind of place that looked like it had been built to survive riots. A box of concrete and corrugated steel, fenced in on all sides, squatting near the water where the city didn't want to remember it, still did business. The streetlights along the access road flickered with a lazy, dying buzz. Deputy Lucas Reed was already there when Ethan pulled up, parking, slightly crooked, half out of impatience and half out of habit. Lucas was younger, energetic in a way that hadn't yet been punished out of him. He stood under the spill of a streetlight, shoulders hunched in his jacket, hands tucked into his sleeves like he'd underestimated how cold river wind could get. He flashed a grin when Ethan stepped out. "You always show up like you're entering a library." Ethan glanced at the building, then at the fence line, then at Lucas. Libraries don't usually have no trespassing signs and broken padlocks. Lucas's smile faltered as he followed Ethan's gaze. The chain-link gate had a latch, but the padlock hanging from it wasn't locked. It dangled open, swaying slightly like it had been handled recently. "Okay," Lucas said, voice dropping. "That's new. I checked the address on the way. In place should be empty. But," he shrugged, trying for casual. "Could be teenagers. Could be a squatter." Ethan didn't answer. He reached back, opened the rear door, and Shadow hopped down with controlled precision, no scramble, no wasted motion. The dog's paws hit the wet pavement softly. For a beat, he stood still, head slightly angled, reading the air. Sleet peppered his muzzle. He didn't blink. Ethan clipped the leash with a practiced snap. "You stay behind us," he told Lucas. "If anything feels off, you don't play hero, you call it." Lucas raised 2 fingers in a quick salute. "Yes, Dad." Ethan's mouth didn't quite smile, but something in his eyes loosened just enough to acknowledge the attempted humor. Then he was moving. Shadow aligned at his left knee like they shared the same rhythm of thought. They went through the gate. The metal squealed. The sound seemed louder than it should have been. Inside the perimeter, the yard was a scatter of loading docks, stacked pallets, and abandoned machinery that looked skeletal in the weak light. The main building had a side door with an access keypad. A faint strip of fluorescent glow leaked from beneath it. Ethan lifted a hand. Shadow stopped instantly. The dog's ears pivoted. His nose worked, slow and deliberate, not sniffing like a pet hunting for dinner. Sampling like a professional reading a report, Shadow's body shifted, subtle but unmistakable. His spine tightened, his head lowered. Ethan didn't need words. He felt the change through the leash, the way you feel a current through a wire. "What is it?" Lucas whispered behind them. Ethan kept his voice low. "Quiet." He crouched, gloved fingers brushing the ground near the door. Mud, tire tracks, and something else, drag marks, half filled by sleet, leading toward the shadowed side of the building. Shadow let out a low sound, not a bark, not a growl. A warning note that lived in his chest. Ethan's pulse didn't spike. It narrowed. He drew his flashlight, angled it down so the beam didn't announce them to anyone watching through glass. He guided Shadow along the drag marks, away from the lit door, and toward the rear, where the building met the river wall. The air changed back there. It smelled like damp concrete and old oil, but threaded through it was something human, sweat and fear, sharp as a blade. Shadow pulled once, not hard, just enough to say, "This way." They rounded a corner. A vent opening yawned near the base of the structure, half hidden behind a rusted dumpster. The grate was bent outward. Fresh scrape marks scored the metal. Lucas inhaled like he wanted to speak. Ethan raised a finger without turning. Shadow's nose went to the opening. His whole body froze. Then, with sudden certainty, he lunged forward, not to attack, but to reach. The leash snapped taut. Ethan absorbed the force without stumbling. From inside the darkness, a sound came out that didn't belong in a place like this. A breath. Not the relaxed breathing of someone sleeping. Not the steady breathing of someone hiding with a plan. This was ragged, small. Ethan lowered himself, flashlight beams sliding into the crawlspace. Dust motes glittered like ash. There was a narrow concrete tunnel leading under the building, damp and low. And there, pressed against the wall like she'd been trying to become part of it, was a woman. She was maybe late 20s, maybe older. Shock erased age. Her hair was tangled, wet at the ends, clinging to her face. A sleeve of her hoodie was torn. Her hands were scraped raw, nails broken. Her eyes were huge and glassy, fixed on Shadow like he was the only thing in the world that made sense. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. Shadow lowered his head and whined a soft, urgent sound. He didn't step into her space. He waited. It was the canine version of permission. "I'm here. You're not alone." Ethan's voice was calm enough to be a hand. "Ma'am, you're safe. I'm going to help you out." Her gaze flicked to him. For a second, fear flared sharp and primal. Then it died under exhaustion. She nodded once, barely. Ethan reached in, careful, and she grabbed his sleeve with surprising strength. Her grip was a drowning person's grip. Lucas crouched behind Ethan, flashlight in hand now too, beam steady. "Oh, Jesus," Lucas murmured under his breath, then caught himself. "Sorry." Ethan didn't respond. He braced and pulled. The woman crawled forward, knees scraping concrete. Shadow backed up in perfect sync, making space, watching her the way he watched an injured person on a battlefield, ready to respond, but not crowding. When she finally emerged into the open air, she collapsed on the wet ground, shoulders shaking, lungs gulping, like she hadn't remembered how to breathe. Ethan took off his jacket, laid it over her without asking. "What's your name?" She opened her mouth again. This time a sound came out, but it wasn't a name. It was a single syllable of panic. Her eyes darted past them, toward the building, toward the yard, toward the fence line. "Hey," Ethan said softly, bringing her focus back. "Look at me. You're outside. You're with police. You're not trapped." She blinked hard, like she was fighting to keep the world from disappearing. Then her hand fumbled inside her torn pocket. She pulled out a small object paper, plastic, something stiff with age. She shoved it at Ethan, like it burned her to hold it. Ethan took it carefully. The flashlight beam caught the faded print. An evidence tag. Not new. Not fresh. Yellowed, edges curled, barcodes smeared, but still legible. Lucas leaned in, squinting. That's old. Ethan didn't answer right away. His thumb traced the case number like his skin remembered it. Because it did. He had written that number once, years ago, in a report that never saw daylight. A file that had been sealed for investigation integrity. A file that had followed him like a shadow of its own. The woman tried again to speak. Her lips moved. Her voice was barely a thread. They'll. Her eyes rolled back. She collapsed fully. Lucas's hands came up instinctively. Hey, she's out. Ethan caught her shoulder before her head hit the pavement. Shadow barked once sharp, alarmed, then pressed close, sniffing her face, checking for breath, tail rigid with concern. She's breathing, Ethan said. Shallow. Shock. Lucas already had his radio up. Dispatch, we need medical at Rivergate Annex. Female, unresponsive but breathing. Ethan kept his eyes on the evidence tag. He felt something in the universe shift like a lock clicking. He looked toward the building again, toward the glowing strip of light under the side door. Whatever had happened here tonight wasn't random, and whatever that tag belonged to had crawled back into the world for a reason. Ethan rose, the tag in his hand, Shadow at his side, Lucas hovering with that mix of adrenaline and worry. The river kept moving, dark and patient, and somewhere in the industrial silence, Ethan could feel it, the old case, the old mistake, the old ghost stirring awake. The ambulance lights painted the loading yard in slow pulses blue, then red, then blue again, turning wet concrete into a breathing canvas. Paramedics moved with practiced speed, kneeling beside the woman, checking her pulse, lifting her eyelids, asking questions she couldn't answer. Ethan stood a few feet back, letting them work, but his attention never left the scene. Not the obvious one, the medic's hands, the oxygen mask, the gurney, the other scene, the one that lived in patterns, the bent grate, the drag marks, the strip of light under the side door, and the evidence tag in his hand like a splinter that had finally worked its way to the surface. Deputy Lucas Reed rocked on his heels, trying to look useful and not anxious at the same time. So, we're thinking she's a trespasser? Or she got chased in there? Or... Ethan didn't look at him. We don't guess in the open. Lucas swallowed, then nodded like he'd been corrected in front of a teacher he respected. Right. Sorry. Shadow sat at Ethan's left, ears up, eyes fixed on the building as if he expected it to breathe. The dog's chest rose and fell slow, controlled, but his nostrils flared every few seconds, drawing in the air again and again like he didn't trust what it was telling him. A paramedic stood, pulling off a glove. She's severely dehydrated, mild hypothermia, shock. We're taking her in. Ethan stepped forward. Did she say anything? Any name? Not really, one word. They. Then she faded. Lucas exhaled. Great. Super helpful. Ethan's gaze stayed level. It's enough. The paramedics lifted the woman. Her head lolled slightly. For a second, her eyes cracked open just a sliver. They found Shadow first. Like the dog was the anchor. Shadow whined softly and leaned forward until the leash stopped him. He didn't bark. He didn't jump. He just offered his presence the way he always did. Quiet, non-negotiable loyalty. The woman's fingers twitched as if she wanted to reach for him, then her eyes closed again. The ambulance doors shut. The siren didn't wail. They didn't want to announce they were leaving with a witness. As the ambulance rolled away, Ethan turned to Lucas. You stay here with the perimeter until backup arrives. Don't go inside. Don't touch anything. Lucas blinked. Wait, where are you going? Ethan held up the evidence tag. To see the one person who can tell me why this exists. Lucas's brows lifted. Captain Hayes? Ethan nodded. Carbon County Precinct at 213A. Smelled like burnt coffee and paper that had lived too long. The fluorescent lights made everything look like it had been washed of warmth, which suited Ethan just fine. Warmth was distracting. Captain Maria Hayes' office light was on. Maria Hayes wasn't tall, but she carried authority like it was bone deep, pragmatic, empathetic, and too experienced to be impressed by adrenaline. She was behind her desk, reading something on a tablet, When Ethan knocked once and walked in, her eyes flicked up, took in the sleet on his shoulders, the leash in his hand, Shadow's steady presence at his side. Then her gaze dropped to Ethan's hand. "What is that?" she asked. Ethan set the evidence tag on her desk like it was a weapon he didn't want to keep. Maria's expression changed in a way that was almost imperceptible. Just a tightening around the eyes, a small shift in her jaw. She picked up the tag carefully, read the case number. Then she leaned back slow. "That file is sealed," she said. Ethan kept his voice even. "It's unsealed now. Someone put it in a woman's pocket tonight, like a message. She was found hiding under Rivergate Annex." Maria's gaze snapped to him. "Alive?" "Yes, hospital, shock." Maria exhaled, controlled. "Rivergate's outside our normal patrol rotation. It won't be now." She turned the tag over again. "This is from the Klein Street corruption investigation. 8 years ago." Ethan didn't flinch. "I know." Maria watched him for a moment, weighing. Maria didn't speak unless she meant it. "Why are you bringing this to me at 2 in the morning, Ethan?" Ethan's throat tightened once. Then he said the truth. "Because the tag had already demanded it. Because my report is attached to that case number. And because the last time I saw that file, I let it disappear." Silence filled the office. Shadow shifted his weight, nails clicking once on the floor. His ears flicked between Ethan and Maria, reading their tones. Maria leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Say it clean. Say it clean." Ethan's jaw worked, then settled. 8 years ago, I wrote a supplemental report after the Klein Street raid. I included observations about evidence handling, about chain of custody irregularities. I was told it would be sealed to protect the investigation from contamination. Maria didn't blink. "And you accepted that?" Ethan's eyes stayed steady. "Yes. And now the evidence tag turns up in the hands of a terrified woman under a closed facility in the middle of the night." "Yes." Maria's voice softened by a degree not indulgent, just human. "What do you think is happening?" Ethan didn't guess. He didn't dramatize. He laid it out like a tactical map. Someone connected to that old case is active. The witness might be a survivor, a courier, or someone who knows something. The tag was meant to reach someone who would recognize the case number. Maria's gaze sharpened. "You!" Ethan nodded once. "Me?" Maria tapped the tag against the desk lightly, a habit she had when she was thinking. "And your fear is that your sealed report is part of why the wrong people stayed protected." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes?" Maria's eyes held his. "Ethan, I need you to be honest with me right now. Fully. Not the version you tell yourself so you can sleep." Ethan felt something old in his chest, resistance, the instinct to take the blame privately and keep moving. But the pipeline of tonight was already set. Silence wasn't an option anymore. He said it quietly. "I was a newer officer then. I thought I was doing the right thing by trusting the process. I thought if I pushed, I'd compromise the case." Maria's voice was flat. "And what else?" Ethan's stare hardened. "I was also protecting my career." Maria didn't react, but the air in the room shifted. Not in judgment. She nodded once, almost like she respected the honesty even as it hurt. "Okay," Maria said. "Here's what we do. We treat the witness as a priority protection case. We bring in Dr. Lena Moore to verify the tag and cross-match it to our archive system. And we keep this tight. No broadcast." Ethan's shoulders didn't loosen, but something steadied inside him. "And the sealed file?" 8-knot file. 8-knot file. Maria's eyes stayed on the tag. "If we pull it too loudly, we alert whoever buried it. If we leave it buried, we stay blind." She looked up. "You're going to the hospital. Quietly. You're going to be the calmest thing in her room. If she talks, you listen. If she doesn't, you don't push." Ethan nodded. Maria's gaze flicked to Shadow. "And you're taking him." A Tindown. Shadow's ears perked like he understood his name had been spoken. Maria added, "Lucas stays on perimeter until we relieve him. Then he runs errands for Lena. If anyone asks questions, the answer is routine welfare check." Ethan took the evidence tag back, slipping it into a clear bag Maria handed him. As he turned to leave, Maria's voice stopped him. "Ethan." He paused. Maria's tone was softer than her posture. If this goes where I think it might go, you're going to feel a lot of things you've had locked down for a long time. Ethan didn't turn fully, but his voice carried the same controlled honesty. I know. Maria held his gaze. Don't carry it alone. For a second, it felt like the first time he'd heard those words. He left before he could answer them with anything other than action. Carbon County Medical Center at 3:02 a.m. was quiet in that unnerving way. Hospitals were quiet at night, not silent, just muffled. Life happening behind doors. Ethan walked the hallway with Shadow at heel, harness reflecting the overhead lights. A nurse at the desk glanced up, startled at the dog, then relaxed when she recognized Ethan. You here for the Jane Doe? She asked. Ethan nodded. How is she? Stable. Shaken. We got her warm fluids. She hasn't said much. Ethan didn't demand entry like he owned the place. He waited for permission because people in shock needed to feel control. The nurse buzzed him in. The room smelled like antiseptic and warmed blankets. The woman lay on the bed, IV in her arm, hair combed back loosely. Her face was bruised along the cheekbone. Not fresh purple bruising, but yellowed at the edges like it had been there longer than a night. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, like she was afraid to look anywhere else. Ethan stepped in slowly. Shadow entered behind him, then sat near the foot of the bed, body angled slightly toward the woman present but not intrusive. His gaze flicked to her face, then to Ethan, then back again, like he was building a bridge. The woman's eyes finally shifted. They landed on Shadow. Her breath hitched. Shadow didn't move. He simply held her gaze with that steady canine attention that felt like someone saying, I see you. Ethan spoke softly. I'm Officer Ethan Cole. You're safe here. No one's coming in without us knowing. Her eyes moved to Ethan, then back to Shadow. Her voice was a rasp. He found me. Ethan didn't ask who. He didn't press. He let the words exist. You hid at Rivergate, Ethan said. That's why we found you. She swallowed hard. I didn't choose it. I ran until my lungs. She squeezed her eyes shut. I ran. Ethan nodded, as if that explained everything. Because it did. He pulled a chair near the bed, but he didn't sit too close. He kept space, kept safety. Someone put an evidence tag in your pocket, Ethan said gently. Do you know why? Her eyes snapped open, fear sharpened. You have it? Ethan kept his tone calm. Yes. It's safe. It's evidence now. She shook her head quickly, like the word evidence itself could summon danger. No, don't. If it becomes evidence, it disappears. Ethan felt something cold in his chest. Has it disappeared before? She stared at him. Her throat worked like she was swallowing something jagged. Then she nodded once. Ethan let silence stretch. Not empty, but intentional. Shadow's ears twitched. His tail gave a single, slow sweep against the floor. Quiet reassurance. The woman's voice dropped. They took my statement. Years ago. I thought it meant I'd be safe. And then my file vanished. Like I never existed. Ethan's jaw tightened. Who took your statement? She hesitated, eyes darting to the door. A detective. A man who smiled like a friend. Ethan didn't ask for a name. Names were fuel. He needed foundation first. And now? Ethan asked. She swallowed. Now he's not a detective anymore. He's something worse. Ethan leaned forward slightly. What is he to you? Her lips trembled. My guardian. Ethan's mind ticked through possibilities: legal guardianship, conservatorship, protective custody gone wrong, paper chains, invisible cages. Her hands tightened around the blanket. He says I can't make choices. He says I'm unstable. He uses it to. Her voice broke. She pressed her fist to her mouth as if to shove the sound back down. Ethan didn't rush her. Take your time. What did... She breathed, shaking. He uses the courts, the hospital, forms. He says if I talk, they'll take me back. They'll sign me away. Ethan's stomach tightened. Who is they? She whispered. People who owe him. Ethan heard it. Systemic. Corruption that didn't need guns. just stamps. He kept his voice level. What's your name? Her eyes fluttered, like the question itself was dangerous. Shadow rose slowly and stepped closer to the bed, placing his head near her knee close enough to be felt through the blanket. He didn't touch her skin, just offered presence. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. Claire, she whispered. Claire. Then, like she regretted it instantly, she added, don't write it down. Ethan nodded. I won't. Not yet. Her shoulders sagged with a tiny, exhausted relief. Ethan asked the next question carefully, like stepping on thin ice. Claire, why Rivergate? Her eyes went distant. Because that's where the old files go, before they get cleaned. Ethan's pulse narrowed again. You've been inside? She nodded, barely. I worked there. Night shifts. Inventory. I saw bins labeled case numbers, evidence tags, paper bundles. I thought it was storage. Her breathing quickened. Shadow's head pressed a little more firmly against the blanket, grounding her. And then? Ethan asked. And then I saw my own name, she whispered. Ethan felt his spine go rigid. Claire's voice dropped to a tremor. I saw it on a folder. My statement. And the stamp said, archived. Like it was done. Like it was over. But I never got justice. I never got protection. Ethan's throat tightened. What did you do? I stole the tag, she said. Shame and desperation mixed. Just the tag. I thought if I had something physical, something that proved the file existed, someone would have to listen. Ethan didn't tell her stealing was wrong. It was irrelevant. Survival had its own laws. And tonight? Ethan asked. Her face crumpled. He found out. He cornered me in the lot. He said I could either come quietly or he'd have me committed. Again. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Again? Claire's lips parted, the confession spilled. Last time I tried to talk, they said I was hysterical. They said I was imagining it. They put me in a facility. He visited me there. Smiling. Ethan's hand tightened on the chair arm. Claire whispered. He said no one believes broken girls. For a moment, Ethan didn't trust his voice. Then he spoke, slow and certain. Someone believes you. Claire's eyes searched his. Why? Ethan's answer was honest, and it cost him. Because I've seen what happens when people hide behind procedure. Her eyes narrowed. You're part of it. Ethan didn't deny it. I might have been. A long time ago. But not tonight. The tension in Claire's face eased by a fraction, like a fist unclenching. Ethan kept going, because truth was the only currency that worked in a room like this. I can't promise everything gets fixed fast, Ethan said. But I can promise this. You don't go back to him. Claire's eyes filled again. He'll come here. Ethan glanced at the door. Not without us knowing. Claire's voice broke. He has papers. Ethan nodded. Then we'll bring better papers. Shadow let out a low, steady huff, almost like agreement. Claire stared at Shadow. He's calm. Ethan's gaze softened. He's trained, but he's also good. Claire's lips trembled. I didn't know dogs like that existed. Ethan breathed out slowly. I didn't know a lot of things existed until I had to. The door opened gently. Captain Maria Hayes stepped in, followed by a woman with dark hair pulled into a neat bun, a tired face, and eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Lena Moore. Lena's gaze flicked to Claire, then to Ethan, then to Shadow. She took in the scene in one sweep and understood the emotional temperature immediately. Maria's voice was quiet. Claire, I'm Captain Maria Hayes. This is Dr. Lena Moore. We're here to help. Claire tensed at the word doctor. Lena softened her tone. I'm not here to evaluate you, she said. I'm here to protect the truth. Claire's eyes narrowed. How? Lena held up her hands empty. Ethan brought me a tag. If it matches our archived registry, I can prove it hasn't been fabricated. I can establish chain of custody history from the system side. Claire's breath trembled. Systems lie. Lena nodded once, unexpectedly. Sometimes they do. That's why we cross-check. Multiple sources. We build something that's harder to erase. Claire's gaze flicked to Ethan. You trust her? Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes. Maria stepped closer but kept respectful distance. Claire, you mentioned a guardian. Do you have legal papers, anything on you? Claire swallowed. He took my phone. Maria nodded. Okay. Then we'll work from what we have. Lena turned to Ethan. Show me the tag. Ethan handed it to her. Lena's eyes moved quickly, reading. She didn't dramatize her reaction, but Ethan saw the shift: recognition, concern, a quiet anger. This case number, Lena said softly. It's in our system. It was flagged for restricted access. Maria's jaw tightened. By who? Lena met Maria's eyes. That's what I'm going to find out. 6. Ethan watched Claire as the words sank in. Her shoulders shook once, then steadied. For the first time since the crawl space, her eyes held something besides fear. The fragile beginning of leverage. Maria looked at Ethan. We need to move fast. If the Guardian has any legal authority, he may try to assert it. Ethan nodded. We can't let him touch her. Maria's expression was unyielding. We won't. Shadow's ears perked, as if he sensed the shift from rescue to defense. Lena's voice stayed calm. Claire, I'm going to ask one question. You don't have to answer if it hurts, but it helps us build the right protection. Claire's eyes darted between them. What? Lena's gaze was steady. When you saw your file at Rivergate, did you see any other names? Any other case numbers? Claire's mouth went dry. She hesitated. Ethan didn't push. He waited. Claire swallowed. Yes. Lena's posture didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. How many? Claire whispered. Dozens. The room went still. Maria's voice dropped. That's not a rogue guardian. That's a pipeline. Ethan felt the weight settle. Not just one victim. Not just one old case. A system that cleaned the evidence of its own crimes. Claire's voice shook. They erase people. Ethan's voice was quiet but iron. Not anymore. Chab avide now. Chab avise. Shadow's head lifted, eyes on Ethan, as if waiting for the next move. And Ethan knew what the next move was. Not a raid. Not a dramatic shootout. A controlled lawful strike. A courtroom corridor. A testimony that could shatter a shield made of stamps and seals. And the one truth Ethan could no longer avoid. If his old sealed report helped build that shield, then the only way to break it was to step into the light and shatter himself first. Morning came without ceremony. No sunrise epiphany. No gentle easing of tension. Just the gray weight of dawn pressing against the hospital windows, turning the city into a washed-out sketch of itself. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat in a molded plastic chair outside Claire's room, elbows on his knees, hands loosely clasped. Shadow lay at his feet, head resting on his paws, eyes open, not watchful in the obvious way, no scanning, no tension but present. Like he understood that the danger right now wasn't something you could bite. Deputy Lucas Reed arrived just after 7, hair damp from a rush shower, coffee in hand, energy dialed down a notch by the seriousness in the air. He stopped short when he saw Ethan's face. Oh, Lucas said quietly. It's that kind of morning. Ethan glanced up. You're early. Lucas shrugged. Captain Hayes said now, not soon. Figured that meant immediately. He offered the coffee. Ethan shook his head. Lucas followed Ethan's gaze to the closed hospital room door. That her? Yes. Lucas exhaled through his nose. Lena's already at the precinct. She locked herself in with the archive server, told IT she'd scream if they interrupted her. That earned the faintest curve at the corner of Ethan's mouth. Sounds like Lena. Lucas shifted his weight. Captain wants us downtown in 45. There's movement. Ethan straightened slightly. What kind of movement? Lucas lowered his voice. The Guardian filed an emergency petition overnight, claims Claire is a danger to herself, wants her transferred to a psychiatric facility today. Ethan's jaw tightened. Lucas added quickly. Captain Hayes already froze it. Temporarily. But once the judge's clerk logs in, it becomes messy. Shadow lifted his head, ears angling forward at the change in Ethan's breathing. Ethan stood. Then we don't give him time. The Carbon County Courthouse didn't feel like a battlefield, but Ethan had learned a long time ago that danger didn't need gunfire to be lethal. The building was old brick and white stone, steps worn smooth by decades of feet carrying hopes, lies, and everything in between. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polish and stale paper. Voices echoed in restrained tones. Order here wasn't enforced by fear, it was enforced by routine. Ethan moved through it with the same focus he'd brought into hostile zones overseas. Shadow walked at his side, vest clean, leash loose. The dog's presence turned heads not because he was aggressive, but because he didn't belong to chaos. He belonged to purpose. Captain Maria Hayes waited near a side corridor, posture straight, expression unreadable. Doctor. Lena Moore stood beside her, tablet in hand, eyes alight with that particular intensity that meant she'd found something and it mattered. Maria spoke first. We have a narrow window, Lena cut in, and a solid spine. Ethan's eyes went to Lena. You confirmed it, Lena nodded. The evidence tag is real. It matches archived intake logs from Rivergate storage. Lena continued. More importantly, she tapped the screen. The access records don't match official authorization. Maria crossed her arms. Meaning? Lena looked up. Meaning someone with elevated clearance accessed sealed files without procedural justification. Repeatedly. Over years. Lucas whistled under his breath. That's not subtle. Lena's mouth twitched. It's bold, which means they assume no one would ever check. Ethan asked the question that mattered most. Does it tie back to Claire's guardian? Lena hesitated. Indirectly. The access logs are masked under departmental credentials that no longer exist. Maria's eyes sharpened. Ghost accounts. Yes, Lena said. But the petition filed this morning used legal language identical to prior motions connected to those same cases. Same phrasing, same structure. Lucas frowned. So, a template, a playbook. Lena corrected. Ethan felt the old weight settle again. Patterns. Always. Patterns. Maria turned to Ethan. The Guardian's attorney is here. They're pushing for an immediate transfer. Ethan nodded. Then we interrupt. Maria raised an eyebrow. With what? Ethan met her gaze. With the truth. Maria studied him. That truth includes you. Ethan didn't flinch. Yes. Maria took a breath, then nodded once. All right. The crew many, instated in tested place. She turned to Lucas. You stay with Shadow. Keep eyes on the corridor. If anything escalates, you intervene without spectacle. Lucas swallowed, then squared his shoulders. Yes, ma'am. Shadow looked up at Lucas, then back at Ethan, ears flicking. Ethan knelt briefly, resting a hand on Shadow's shoulder. Stay sharp, he murmured. Shadow leaned into the touch once, then sat beside Lucas, calm as stone. Maria and Ethan stepped through the heavy wooden doors into the hearing room. The hearing wasn't grand. No jury, no gallery full of spectators. CB and Daktov, 2000 problem, understood. Just a judge's bench, 2 long tables, and a tension thick enough to taste. The Guardian sat at one table with his attorney, a man in a gray suit whose smile was polished to a mirror shine. The Guardian himself was composed, hands folded neatly, eyes carrying the practiced patience of someone used to being obeyed. When Ethan entered, the Guardian's gaze flicked up. Recognition sparked. Then, something colder. The judge looked up. Captain Hayes, she said. This was scheduled as a procedural matter. Maria's voice was respectful but firm. Your Honor, new evidence has surfaced that directly impacts the safety and legality of this petition. The attorney opened his mouth. The judge raised a hand. One at a time. Her gaze shifted to Ethan. Officer? Ethan stepped forward. My name is Officer Ethan Cole, he said evenly. I'm here because I authored a report connected to the archived case file this petition relies on. A ripple moved through the room. The Guardian's smile thinned. The judge leaned back slightly. Proceed, Ethan inhaled once. Then he did the thing that terrified him more than any physical threat ever had. He told the truth. 8 years ago, Ethan said, I participated in an investigation involving evidence later stored at the Rivergate annex. I documented irregularities in handling procedures. That report was sealed under advisement to protect the integrity of the case. The Guardian's attorney rose. Objection. relevance. Maria cut in. Your Honor, this directly pertains to the legitimacy of the evidence being used to justify this guardianship. The judge nodded. Overruled. Ethan continued, voice steady but stripped of armor. I did not pursue that report further. I accepted the seal. That decision was mine. The judge's gaze sharpened. And you believe that decision was incorrect? Yes, Ethan said. I believe it allowed a system to continue operating without accountability. The Guardian's attorney laughed softly. Speculation. Ethan turned his head, not aggressive, just direct. Then, let's talk about access logs. Lena rose from the back, stepping forward at Maria's nod. She handed the clerk a packet. These are verified system records, Lena said. They show unauthorized access to sealed files, including Claire's over multiple years. The judge flipped through the pages, brow furrowing. The Guardian shifted in his seat. The attorney tried again. Even if procedural issues existed, my client's guardianship is lawful. Ethan spoke again, quieter now. Your Honor, Claire did not come to us asking for protection. She came to us running from it. The room stilled. Ethan met the judge's eyes. She was found hiding beneath an industrial facility, carrying physical proof that her own file had been buried. She was terrified of speaking because prior attempts resulted in institutionalization. The judge's lips pressed thin. Is that accurate? The Guardian's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Maria stepped in. We're requesting an immediate suspension of guardianship, pending full review and protective status for Claire. Silence stretched. The judge exhaled slowly. Granted. The sound wasn't dramatic, but it landed like a seismic shift. The Guardian's attorney stood abruptly. Your Honor, the judge's gavel tapped once. Enough. The judge looked directly at the Guardian. You are ordered to have no contact with Claire pending investigation. The Guardian's eyes finally burned. He stood halfway, then stopped when two deputies stepped closer. Outside the room, Lucas felt it before he saw it. Shadow's ears snapping up, posture shifting. The Guardian's phone buzzed in his pocket. Shadow growled. Low, controlled, a warning. Lucas's hand tightened on the leash. Easy, buddy. The Guardian glanced toward the door, calculating. Shadow's growl deepened just enough to say, Don't. The Guardian sat back down. Inside, the judge closed the file. This hearing is adjourned. The hallway outside felt different when Ethan stepped out. Lighter. Not safe, but honest. Maria exhaled slowly. That took courage. Accept. Ethan didn't look triumphant. It took responsibility. Lena approached, eyes tired but satisfied. We'll need to go deeper. If there are dozens of names. Ethan nodded. One step at a time. Lucas approached with Shadow. So, we just took down a legal ghost. Ethan glanced at Shadow, who looked up at him calmly, tail giving a single measured sweep. We stopped one, Ethan said. The rest comes next. Lucas hesitated. You okay? Ethan considered the question. The weight was still there. The guilt hadn't vanished, but it had shifted. Ask me later, he said. Claire sat in a small, quiet room with sunlight spilling across the floor when Ethan found her again. She looked smaller out of the hospital bed, more human. Her eyes lifted when she saw him. It stopped, she said. Ethan nodded. For now. She studied his face. You told them. Yes. Her voice trembled. Why? Ethan didn't soften the truth. Because silence protects the wrong people. Claire looked at Shadow, who sat beside Ethan, solid and calm. Thank you, she whispered. Ethan shook his head gently. You did the hardest part. You survived. Claire swallowed. What happens now? Ethan answered carefully. Now you get time. And space. And choice. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not loud, not messy, just release. Shadow stood and pressed his head lightly against her knee. Claire's hand rested on his fur, tentative at first, then certain. Ethan watched them and felt something inside him settle into a new alignment. The job wasn't finished, but for the first time in years, he wasn't hiding from it. The fallout didn't arrive like an explosion. It came like paperwork, forms, emails, quiet phone calls made behind closed doors, requests worded carefully enough to sound routine but sharp enough to cut if mishandled. Ethan knew this phase well. It was the part no one filmed. No adrenaline, no applause, just pressure constant and patient. Claire was moved to a protected residence by nightfall. Not a facility, not a hospital wing. A plain, clean apartment with controlled access, and a social worker who spoke slowly and didn't assume fragility meant incompetence. Dr. Lena Moore oversaw the transition personally, making sure every signature was accounted for, every line double-checked. Deputy Lucas Reed helped carry boxes up the stairs, trying a little too hard to keep things light. "You know," Lucas said, setting down a bag of donated clothes, "this place has better lighting than my apartment." Claire managed a small smile. "You can trade." Lucas chuckled, then sobered when Ethan caught his eye. He nodded once and stepped out, giving space. Ethan lingered near the door. Shadow sat beside him, posture loose but attentive, like a sentry who understood that safety didn't always mean danger. Had vanished. It just meant it was further away. Claire folded her hands together, then unfolded them. "He won't stop," she said quietly. Ethan didn't lie. "No. But he'll have to operate in daylight now." She looked up. "That's worse for people like him." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "It is." Claire hesitated. You didn't have to do what you did today." Ethan met her gaze. "I did." She studied his face, then nodded slowly. I think that's why it worked." Ethan didn't answer. Some truths didn't need reinforcement. When he left, Shadow glanced back once, ears flicking, then followed Ethan down the stairs without hesitation. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. "It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together." Lucas raised a hand. "So, cult? But with clipboards?" Maria shot him a look. "Focus." Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile, not celebratory, just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "This isn't one bad actor," Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced. The precinct felt different after the hearing. Not hostile. Not celebratory. Just alert. Captain Maria Hayes stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, sleeves rolled up, a marker in her hand. Names, dates, and case numbers filled the board in tight, disciplined rows. Lena stood beside her, tapping a stylus against her tablet. This isn't one bad actor, Lena said. It's a mesh. Legal, administrative, and psychological control points working together. Lucas raised a hand. So, cult? But with clipboards? Maria shot him a look. Focus. Lucas winced.